Well, good morning, everyone. We hope that you're having a great October, even with all this crazy weather we're having. Welcome to Trio Maryland's October Zoom meeting. It's great to see everyone. I'm Marty Marin, and this is my wife, Michelle, and we manage Trio Maryland. We'd like to welcome all our members and guests today, and thank you for attending. Today's topic's very interesting. Find your relief, what you need to know about medical and adult use cannabis. It's current information that we all need to know to make an informed decision regarding the use of cannabis. Our November topic is going to be transplant medications and insurance. Unfortunately, something that we all have to deal with. Now I'm going to turn this over to Michelle, and she's going to introduce today's speaker.
Good morning. We're very lucky. Today's guest speaker is Tracey Lancaster Miller, Executive Vice President of Peake ReLeaf Dispensary. Tracey was born and raised in Baltimore and moved to Colorado in 2008. There, she worked her way up from the ground floor in the cannabis industry to become a founding member and executive vice president of Peake ReLeaf, an independently owned and operated dispensary in Rockville. Tracey also volunteers as the president of the Maryland Dispensary Association. It is the only trade association advocating on behalf of licensed dispensaries in the state. Tracey's specialization and expertise is in compliance and government relations in the cannabis industry. We're really very fortunate to have Tracey address the Trio Maryland community. Thank you for presenting to our group. Welcome, and I now turn the program over to you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you, Marty, and hello, everybody in the Trio community. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's really an honor to be able to speak with you today about this topic. That was a really great introduction of me, so thank you, Michelle. I'd like to kind of set the stage with a little bit of information, just a teeny bit more of information about myself and Peake ReLeaf, so that you all know kind of the perspective that I come from when I'm giving the information that I'm going to give today. So Peake ReLeaf, we are a single licensed dispensary. So what that means in the state of Maryland is that we do not grow our own products and we do not produce any processed products. So we are the patient and consumer facing entity that provides products to those who are seeking products. Our store has been open for about 5.5 years. I wear many hats at my store. As you heard, there's a lot of things that I do with the Dispensary Trade Association in the state. At the store, I do a lot of work with compliance. I also do a lot of our training with staff, and this is a theme that I think is going to come up again and again as we are speaking today, that training at a dispensary is so important. And there's a lot of, within the state of Maryland, there's a lot of requirements for those that will be helping you. We call them in Maryland dispensary agents, but most commonly you will probably hear them referred to as bud tenders. So that's what I'm going to refer to them as today. Bud tender training is so important, and most states have very clear either regulations or laws that govern what they need to be trained on. I'd also just like to emphasize that I am not a medical professional. As Michelle said, my background is really in compliance, government relations, so I'm very knowledgeable about regulations and law, and I do a lot of the science and therapeutics training at my store, but I myself am not a medical professional. So I'm going to provide some information about these things, and if there are more detailed questions that some of you guys have that are kind of related to things that might be more appropriate for me to direct you to a medical professional, I have some resources that I can do that for. I'm going to have another slide at the end that is going to have my contact information, and I'd be happy to pop it into the chat as well, or have it sent out to you all via email. If you would like to ask me any, more specific questions that we aren't able to get into today, I'm really happy to do so. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. We're going to talk about, first off, common conditions that cannabis can treat. There's a huge host of conditions conditions or symptoms that cannabis may be able to help. I like to caveat this conversation with cannabis isn't right for every single person for every single condition. It does help a lot of people with a lot of different conditions. So I have kind of just a sample list of some of the more common conditions that you'll see, but this is not a comprehensive list. Anxiety and depression are a big one that cannabis can treat. Other, mood disorders as well, cannabis can help treat with those. Chronic and severe pain are conditions that most states that have medical programs have certain conditions that you can qualify for the medical cannabis program to be enrolled into it. And chronic and severe pain is on every state's list that has a medical cannabis program. Insomnia and sleep disorders, that is another condition that cannabis can be really effective for, as well as muscle spasms and tremors. Going closely related to that, seizure conditions as well. I think many of us have seen there are a huge number of documentaries out there. They've shown how medical cannabis, and specifically a cannabinoid CBD, which we will talk about that later, can be really helpful for seizures. Different types of GI conditions, things having to do with the stomach or the large and small intestines and the bowels, those types of things can be really helped sometimes with cannabis and different cannabinoids that we will talk about later. Nausea and vomiting, as well as general appetite, cannabis can be very effective in helping with as well. There's even a cannabinoid that has been shown to help with diabetes through the regulation of blood sugar, and that's one that we will also get more specifically into later. It's been shown to help with conditions like MS, symptoms from cancer treatments, whether it be pain related to cancer treatments, nausea, vomiting, GI conditions, things like that, and a whole host of other things that can come from those treatments. And it's even been shown to help with complicated medical issues like fibromyalgia, and also migraines and PTSD. So again, this is not a comprehensive list, but I think that this gives a good foundational framework of different types of conditions that cannabis may be able to help with. I will do a word of caution. There are conditions, like we said, cannabis may not be right for everybody. And there are certain conditions that a person should be cautious and consult with a medical professional if cannabis is a treatment that you want to pursue. Most specifically, heart conditions are ones to be cautious with. And this can include high blood pressure. The reason for this is that one of the side effects that from cannabis can be an increase in heart rate or a rapid heart rate. So it could potentially exacerbate some heart conditions. So our next slide talks about some of these side effects. I talked about the racing heart. Side effects do usually tend to be very mild, although they can be more severe. So you could experience disorientation, could experience euphoria, could experience red eyes and dizziness. The racing heart is an important one, as we were saying, with the heart conditions. And so especially if you are on a lot of medications, it is really important to just speak with a medical professional who can talk very specifically about the specific drug that you are on and the dosing and how that may or may not interact with cannabis. And I know that there's many people here who, if you had been interested in pursuing this in the past, you may have had a doctor who's unsupportive of this, and this is not uncommon. So in states like Maryland, there are resources for you that are outside of your current doctor network if you don't have a doctor who is knowledgeable or who can talk to you about these things. The regulations in the state of Maryland require that every dispensary have a clinical director. Usually the clinical director is the only medical professional on staff at these facilities. So this is a person, they are usually either a doctor, a pharmacist, a nurse practitioner, and there's a small number of other types of medical professionals that they can be. These are people who are usually very knowledgeable about medical cannabis, very knowledgeable about cannabis products, very knowledgeable about the drug interactions. And so they can be a great first place for you to start. Most dispensaries in the state of Maryland will offer their clinical director services for free. I know we do that at my store. Those who charge, it is a very low cost as well. Usually $20, $30 for a visit, something like that. And you do not have to already have purchased from them to take advantage of these services. So if you are in the state of Maryland, I would highly recommend it. Also, many of us, our clinical directors, do telemedicine. And so even if you're not in the state of Maryland, you may be able to utilize these services. And that's something that if you're not in the state of Maryland, I can help to guide you if you reach out to me to somebody who can kind of help you in that way. So when we think about cannabis, we want to think about, I think a lot of people think about smoking and vaping. So that's the inhalation method, the route of administration. But there are so many other ways of administering cannabis in regulated markets. There are tons of products that are out there. So it's not just the flower or these concentrates that are smoking and vaping. There are many different methods of oral consumption, and some of these are going to be really similar to, pharmaceuticals. So you can access capsules and tablets that you would swallow, or maybe some tablets that you would chew. But then on top of that, there are other oral routes of administration with various liquids, whether they be more like a kind of like a drink or an elixir, or even a tincture. And there's also, if anyone's traveled to a state like Maryland that has adult use cannabis, or if you're in Maryland and have seen these, we have gummies, there's cookies and brownies and other types of sweets that you tend to see in these markets as well. So all of these oral forms are the kind that go, because you're consuming them orally, they're going through your digestive system. So they're going through your stomach and your intestines. And these are long-lasting products. So they are a slow onset. You'll want to take into account that these products can take anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours to take effect. But then they will stay in the system for anywhere between 6 and 12 hours on the far end. And it really depends on the type of product that you're taking, how much you're taking, and a lot of factors about your individual body, how long it will take to take effect and how long it will last. Not everybody can wait 30 minutes to 2 hours for cannabis to take effect if they're going to be taking it. And inhalation is great in some ways because it is quick onset, but there are other ways to get quick onset without smoking or vaping. One of those ways, the most prominent of those ways, is sublingual. So just like at a pharmacy, there's sublingual tablets that can be put under the tongue and dissolved under the tongue and absorbed by the vein that's under the tongue. This can be done with medical cannabis products too. Usually I've only seen this in tincture form. I haven't seen any sublingual tablets in Maryland, but other states may have different types of products. And so with a tincture, to use it sublingually, again, you'd put it under the tongue. You'd let the vein under the tongue absorb it, and then you get that quick onset. The effects would take only a few minutes to feel. And then it wouldn't be quite as long lasting as if it had been consumed through the digestive system. There's also topical and transdermal applications. So these tend to be your salves, your balms and lotions that have various cannabinoids in them that are absorbed through the skin. There's even products out there that are transdermal patches, and those are pretty cutting edge as well. And finally, we have rectal and vaginal administration as well. So these are suppositories. These also exist in various markets. Usually, you'll see these types of products when a cannabis program has been in operation for many years. So if you're in a state that has, a program that's only been off the ground for a year or two, you may not yet see these products, but they do come over time. And so after thinking about how to administer cannabis, I want to think about what is inside the cannabis that can help with the different conditions that we talked about in the beginning there. So there are hundreds of cannabinoids that exist. And so this is just a small number of cannabinoids. These are going to be probably the most common cannabinoids that you will see in products or on testing labels in any state. THC is, of course, the most common one that I think everybody thinks about when you think about cannabis. This is the one that does cause that euphoric or high effect. So it can be one that many people may be looking to avoid. I think it's important to know that there is medicinal value in THC, despite that it does have, that effect. THC is incredibly effective for pain. It's a really great appetite stimulant. So for those who are having difficulties eating or feeling the desire to eat for a whole host of reasons, THC can really help to reduce nausea and vomiting, which in itself that can then help with appetite as well. THC can be great for sleep, for falling asleep, for staying asleep, and it can be good for PTSD as well. What's important about every cannabinoid, so of course THC as well, is dose. And we're going to get later into questions to ask your bud tender if you're visiting a dispensary. Dosing is so important. Another cannabinoid is CBD. This is probably the second most common one that if anyone is familiar with cannabinoids, you may think of these two, THC and CBD. CBD is a really great cannabinoid for things like anxiety and other, mood, really great for depression. It can also really help with pain, just like THC. And as I mentioned before, the documentaries that I think many of us have seen about medical cannabis helping with seizures, CBD is a huge part of that. You can find products at dispensaries that have different ratios of cannabinoids, most commonly mixes of THC and CBD, though when I get into these other cannabinoids that are listed here, there are also products that have ratios of those. So THC, because it has that euphoric effect, that disorienting effect that some people may be wanting to make sure that they avoid, when you combine THC with CBD, CBD helps to mitigate some of those unwanted side effects that THC can bring. So finding a product that's like a good 1-to-1 ratio of each THC and CBD, that can be a really great place to start. Or maybe even a higher ratio of CBD to THC. I mean, there's even products that have 20 times as much CBD as THC in a product, making it a product where a person would feel no psychoactivity. Third up in this list, we have CBN. CBN is a cannabinoid that's best known to help with sleep. If you go into a dispensary and they have specific products, or maybe you're looking at their online menus, if a product advertises that it is for sleep like a sleepy time something or a snoozy something, it probably, if you look at the label, is going to have CBN in it. It's great for insomnia, helps people to fall asleep and to stay asleep. In addition to that, CBN is great for muscle spasms. So that's one that is less, that's not usually said on the labels of products that have CBN in them, but it is a great benefit of that cannabinoid. CBG is another cannabinoid. This one you start to see more often in markets that have been around for several years, like the Maryland market. We have edibles that have CBG in them now. CBG is really great for GI conditions. And so there's many products that are advertised for like gut support or GI support. They're probably going to have CBG in them. One of the things that CBG is also, if you look it up online, is going to be very popularly known for is for its anti-tumoral properties. I think a really important caveat in the conversation with CBG and when I'm doing the training with my staff at the store is that we never say that cannabis can cure cancer. That's very, very important. There have been studies that have shown, animal studies on, I believe, rats, that have shown that applying CBG to tumors in rats has these anti-tumoral properties, but it has not been replicated in humans, which that is a big deal and a big jump between those studies. Now, a lot of that has to do with it's hard to do research on cannabis in the United States, so most of this research is happening in other countries. But I just wanted to caveat that because if you Google this, you may see that. THCA is another common cannabinoid. It is an appetite stimulant, just like THC is. Most of the cannabinoids on this list, except for THC, are completely non-psychoactive. THCA is one of those. It is completely non-psychoactive. So a person who doesn't want that euphoria, that disorientation, there are THCA products that can provide that appetite stimulation, but without potentially that unwanted side effect. THCA is also a neuroprotectant. And finally on this list, there's THCV. This one, there's a lot of popular news articles written about this one, so I wanted to make sure to include this one as well. THCV is the one that I was referring to when we were talking about common conditions and we were talking about treatment of diabetes. THCV has been shown to help to regulate blood sugar. And at the same time, it's also been shown to help to suppress appetite. So it works kind of in the appetite category, it kind of works in opposite of THC and THCA. So there's a lot of research going on about that one right now, particularly as it relates to diabetes, but it has been shown with that blood sugar regulation. So those are some of the common cannabinoids. So we've talked through common conditions, we've talked through side effects, how we can administer it, and what's inside cannabis. Let's talk a little bit about testing, because I think testing and labeling, consumer safety issues, these are really important parts of any conversation about cannabis. So I have an example here of what a certificate of analysis looks like. So in every state that has a medical or an adult use cannabis program, they're going to have some sort of testing requirements. I'm going to speak specifically to Maryland because that's where I am. Every state has them. There's varying levels of like what they test for. So knowing the regulations that dictate what is required in your state for testing is very important to make the determinations for yourself if these are products that you would want to pursue or not. So within Maryland, we have very, very strict testing standards. And Most states do look at Maryland as kind of a gold standard. There are many states who have very similar testing or the exact same testing. You know, we're in Maryland, we test for everything, pretty much like everything. That's why people think that it's, you know, this is what we should be doing, because we're testing for all of the things that could potentially be harmful, or just all the things to make sure that we know what is inside these products. So this certificate of analysis, just to situate you, this is for flower. So this is for a bud, you know, just like the loose bud. This is not for a processed product like a tincture or something like that. They'll look a little different. One of the first things that's always tested for in Maryland, as you'll see on this COA, is cannabinoid content, because we want to know how much THC is in here, how much CBD, and all of the other cannabinoids that we went over, plus some other ones that I didn't mention, just to keep the time. We can see here, there's the cannabinoid section, and below it, there are also all of the terpenes. I don't get into terpenes on here. Terpenes are just another chemical component found in the cannabis plant that can have medicinal properties. And if anybody wants to know more about those, I'd be happy to talk to you sometime. Just send me an email. You'll see after that, and the summary that we have off to the side, there's a summary of all of the other testing that has been done. So we can see that this flower has been tested for pesticides. It's been tested for mycotoxins, been tested for heavy metals, microbials, water activity, moisture content, and foreign matter. You'll see that there are two areas on here that say not required. That's solvents and vitamin E acetate. The reason it's not required is because that testing is required on products that have undergone a processing process, being turned from the bud into something else. These are not elements. Solvents and vitamin E acetate are not introduced into the flower. They're only things that need to be tested for if it's been turned into something else. So that's why they say not required there. The second page that I have on here, it shows you the detailed breakdown of all the things that they tested for. So it shows you all of the heavy metals that they test for and what the allowable ppms are, if any, and if there was any detectable levels. We can skip the residual solvents and the vitamin E acetate because they didn't test for that one. But mycotoxins, you can see the specific mycotoxins that are required to be tested for, and you can see what the levels are, if they were detectable or not. And you can see the same for microbials. You can see the same for water activity and moisture content. That's really important to make sure, you know, that we're not having too much moisture or water within a product, because that could promote, if there was too much of that, that could promote after the testing period, that could promote the growth of molds and mildews and things like that. So that is why we're testing for water activity and moisture content here. And then they also test for foreign matters as well. In addition to testing, there's also consumer safety issues. I guess before I say the consumer safety issues, just the information that's on the certificate of analysis, all of that information is summarized onto small labels that are on products, but within many states, within Maryland, you can request to see the full certificate of analysis. So if you're really interested in what are the mycotoxins or what are the microbials that are being tested for and what is not being tested for, you know, for your peace of mind, you can request that, and a dispensary is required in the state of Maryland to provide it to you in a timely fashion. With the consumer safety issues, it's really important to keep cannabis out of the hands of children. It's really important to keep it locked away, stored safely. You don't want your pets to get into it either. So if you visit a dispensary in Maryland, and pretty much every state that has an adult use cannabis program has all kinds of materials educational materials from their state, educating the public on responsible and safe cannabis consumption. So these are just examples of things that you'll see around at a Maryland dispensary about safe storage, about not driving or operating heavy machinery under the influence of cannabis, and even like QR codes that you'll see around that will take you to the state website. You know, first time, been a while, they'll provide some information on those pages just to make sure that everybody, you know, is has the resources that they need to make the kinds of decisions that they need to make about whether or not consuming cannabis is right for them. So when you're in a dispensary, you'll see these things around and you'll be talking with a dispensary agent, or most commonly referred to as a bud tender. There are very important questions that you should ask your bud tender. And since I know that there are many people on here who aren't in Maryland, I wanted to kind of put a list of questions that you guys can also ask to determine more about what are the standards in the state that you're in so that you can make your own decisions if this is something that's going to be right for you. Most importantly, are these products third-party tested and verified? We know that that's the case in Maryland because of what I just went over with the regulations. In other states, you will want to ask this question. An important piece of this is third-party tested. Third parties are verifying, you know, not the people who are producing the products, but these third parties in Maryland, we call them independent testing labs, are making sure that what's on this label is actually what's on inside the product. And so that's why it's important to have a third party who is testing and making sure that these products are accurately reflected on these labels. And like I mentioned, asking if you can access the certificate of analysis if you want to see exactly what are the microbials that they test for, or the mycotoxins, or what is the water content of these products so that you can make those decisions. In Maryland, again, you can ask for these and you can, you'll receive them in a timely fashion. Also importantly, it's important to know, are you inside a legitimate licensed dispensary? Every state is different and most states are pretty clear of what is a licensed dispensary and what is not. And there are some issues that we'll go into a little later that I'll make a little bit more clear about that. But you can always ask, is your license from the state regulatory authority on display, and have them show it to you. Also, most states have almost, I think every state that I'm aware of, but I'm not aware of all of them, have a list of approved dispensaries. And so if you're thinking about, like, I want to go out and talk to somebody about these products, you can go to your state regulatory body website, find their approved dispensary list, and then from there you can choose which one you're going to, so you don't even have to ask this question. And then when you're thinking about products, you know, there's different ways of asking these questions, but just to kind of get you started into a conversation with your bud tender, and you could take off the for a beginner if you are not a beginner, but you could say, what products do you recommend for maybe someone who does not want to smoke or vape? That will help the bud tender immediately direct you to all of the other products, all of the edibles, the tinctures, the topicals, everything like that. You could ask your bud tender what products they would recommend that could help with your specific condition. There, like I had mentioned in the beginning, every state, Maryland specifically, but a lot of states have requirements for different kinds of training for your bud tenders. And so while they are not medical professionals, they do have a good idea of how different conditions can be helped by different kinds of products, from trainings that they've done, from conversations that they've had with other, you know, patients and consumers who have come through, and also from their own personal experience, whether it be their experience with their families, So again, they're not medical professionals, but they do tend to be very knowledgeable about products themselves. And incorporating the layer of, in Maryland, the clinical director, who is the medical professional on staff, can really help you be confident in what you're getting. Finally, you can ask them about products that contain certain cannabinoids. Maybe one of the ones that I talked about today, you're very interested in seeing if there's products available with that particular cannabinoid. That's a great way to help direct them to kind of where you would like to go within the conversation. And it's also very important to ask them, how do you know how much to consume? I mentioned when we were talking about the cannabinoids that dosing is very important. It should always be, I think that the best goal is to always find your minimum therapeutic dose. This is going to ensure that you're not taking more than you need to. It's going to ensure, also that you're not paying for more product that you need to. And it's going to make sure that you don't overconsume. And in regard to overconsumption with cannabis, I'd like to acknowledge it can be a very unpleasant experience. That being said, there really are no long-term health consequences to overconsumption. You still do want to make sure to avoid it. So that's why trainings in most states, when we talk about edibles, we say start low and go slow. So start with a low dose, and your bud tender will help you figure out what that dose is, and wait a very long time before you consume any more. And finally, you want to ask how you use the product, because you want to make sure that you have a clear idea before you leave with the product how to utilize it. Maybe it is a form of administration that you are less familiar with. You want to make sure that you have all that information before you leave. States that have medical programs have the process of becoming a medical patient. And in Maryland, we have basically two routes to accessing cannabis. You can become a medical patient, or you can shop as a 21 plus adult use consumer. And we'll talk next about the differences in that. For becoming a medical cannabis patient in Maryland, there's a couple steps that you would do. Basically 2 steps. You register with the state, and when you register with the state, you are showing your residency. You're showing your proof of residency. And then once you've proven to them that you live in the state, then you can go to a medical professional who can provide the certification. The cost in Maryland to become a patient, it's a $25 registration fee, and your registration of proving that residency is good for 6 years. When you go to a doctor or a medical professional, because nurse practitioners and a whole host of other medical categories can provide these, certification fees will vary. You will have to get certified annually. Now, when you're deciding, does it make sense for me to become a medical patient? Every state's process is a little different. Most states, it's a single step. I will say the registration is kind of incorporated into the certification aspect. But again, every state is different. And if you're in another state, I might be able to help you do some research on that. But you may be asking yourself, should I become a medical patient? Should I become an adult use consumer? What would be the best method for me personally to shop? So really, what's the difference? Generally speaking, the products that you purchase, whether you're shopping medical or adult use, are going to be exactly the same. But there are state level differences in the differentiation between medical and adult use. In general, high dose products in every state are going to be restricted to medical patients. In Maryland, this means that any edible products that a dose that is more than 10 milligrams, those are high dose edibles. And so those are restricted only to medical patients. Also in Maryland, only medical patients can access concentrates. Those are also higher potency products. And again, almost every state will have a list of state approved and authorized dispensaries. And these will be products, whether it is medical or adult use, you will be accessing these inside these licensed dispensaries. The reason why I kind of have said that twice about the state approved list and being listed inside dispensaries is because of the second piece of it that I am going to kind of close with today. I want to make sure everybody is aware of this consumer safety issue of Delta-8 THC. So there are products that exist. You can purchase them online. You can get them, if you've ever walked in whatever state you're in, if you've ever walked into a gas station, a convenience store, maybe a smoke shop or a head shop, and you've seen what appears to be cannabis products, there is a likelihood that those products are actually Delta-8 THC products. What these products are is they are hemp-derived, unregulated, and untested cannabinoid products. They exist completely outside of any regulatory frameworks with no oversight or accountability to government regulators or lawmakers. This is a big issue that like every state right now is trying to figure out how to get a handle on these products, because I know personally from Maryland, we legalized adult use on July 1st. And I know people, even though they knew me, they were like, oh, hey, I went to the gas station, I got that adult use cannabis. And that is not the adult use cannabis. You want to make sure that you're inside a licensed dispensary. Because these products aren't tested, all the things that we talked about with the testing for molds and mildews and all those things, and even just basic things like testing for potency, making sure that that dose that it says is on there is the dose that you are consuming, that is not happening. And Delta-8 is a psychoactive cannabinoid. So it does provide that high, that feeling of euphoria and disorientation. There are other types of products out there. I'm referring to them here as unregulated THC isomers. But so you may see a Delta-10 THC product or a THCO product, or some of the other ones that are listed there. I won't name them all. There are a lot of them. But so I would just say be cautious. If you are checking to make sure that you're going to a licensed dispensary, they are not going to be permitted to carry these products. So that's why these questions are really important that we went over, the questions for your bud tender, to make sure that you are in a place that is participating in your state's regulated, supervised market. And I made a couple of additional resources that I'd be happy to figure out getting these sent out, if that would make sense, Michelle and Marty. There's the patient registration portal if you are interested in becoming a patient in Maryland. I have our MCA's approved dispensary list so that you know that you're going to a legitimate dispensary, and then just some general information about cannabinoids and those common conditions. So with that, that is my email again, and I know that there's some questions in the chat that we can go over.
This has been great, Tracy. While you're looking at the questions, I can add any of those resources if you send me the link when I send them the YouTube link in about a week. So I can add those to the email.
Awesome, thank you. So I see the first question is from Mark, and your question here, I feel like this question is maybe best suited for me to direct you to a medical professional, maybe one of these clinical directors. You're specifically, sorry, there's some words in here that I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a medical professional, but if cannabis products are competing with the liver cytochrome P450 for breakdown. So if you don't mind, Mark, if you would email me this question or email me with that you had this question, and then I can connect you with the appropriate resources to be able to very specifically answer this question for you. So then we have a question from Francis, talking about the transplant medical service providers not prescribing cannabis and wanting to know about the other experience of transplant recipients. And they said in Maryland, the understanding is there's no state requirement for agent education, training, and certification. So there is requirements for that. And with the addition of the adult use laws and regulations that went into effect on July 1st, there's actually a responsible vendor training program that every dispensary agent is required to undergo annually now. So, I mean, that to be said, not every dispensary's training is created equally. And if you are looking for recommendations of dispensaries that I know have very good training programs that I'm very confident in their training, I could help you to find a dispensary in your area where you may be able to engage in an initial conversation. Francis also asked if the reliability of the consumer product supply chain will improve. You've been disappointed to learn a product we've become accustomed to is out of stock. Yes. I work very closely with one of my founding partners who heads up basically all of the ordering for our store to make sure that we have all of these products. And yeah, there's been a number of products that over the years they've come and gone. There's been, you know, for me personally, there's been a topical that I loved that had a heating element to it that was really great for some of my shoulder joint pain that I experienced. That's basically been phased out of the market. I think that this is some of the difficulties that we have in a new market, and also when we have a limited number of producers in the state. You know, they're trying to figure out what products are, you know, going to move in the market and making decisions based on that. So what I will say is that I am personally optimistic because since adult use has started in Maryland, we have new licenses that are going to be coming online. There's an application period that's about to start, and those licenses will be given out January 1st. And I will say the road to these new licenses opening is very long. It's a minimum of 18 months to be able to get their doors open. So it's not a short-term solution, but it is moving the market in Maryland in the right direction of getting more producers online who will, you know, be able to, you know, create more products and things like that. But unfortunately, I hear you with that, and I have personally been disappointed with some of my favorite products being phased out as well. Roger asked, are there differences between products sold for medical use versus the general population? I think we kind of covered that one, but generally speaking, the high potency products are going to be for medical. And then general public, you know, when you're thinking about edibles, your cap per dose is going to be 10 milligrams of THC. So figuring out, you know, is it worth your time and money to go through the registration and certification process? Does that outweigh the taxes in your state and the product availability? Because taxes are a really important consideration when you're thinking about cost of adult use product. In Maryland, our tax is very reasonable. It's a flat 9% tax rate, which is very low compared to other states. There's states like some of the West Coast states whose taxes are like 30%. So I could help find some information if you're in another state and you want to kind of be able to weigh those options for yourself. I'd be happy to give you some information about that. Francis asked, isn't cannabis testing analytics specific. Specifically, you won't find something you are not looking for, right? So could the harmful substance present in cannabis that are overlooked? That's a good point. You know, they're testing for what they're testing for. We have had medical cannabis programs. I say medical cannabis because those are the ones that have been around the longest, since 2000. So over the past 23 years, as states have made regulations on what is required in testing, they have identified the items that are both the things that may most commonly appear, in addition to the things that are the most harmful. I am not an analytical scientist within like a lab, and I think that they could give you a really stellar answer about why you could be confident in what they are specifically testing for in Maryland. And I would be happy. I have a really great relationship with a number of the independent testing labs. So Francis, I would be happy to, if you want to reach out to me, I could connect you with one of those individuals and they could provide some more detailed information about why people do consider Maryland testing to be the gold standard in the United States. Let's see. Mark asked about if cannabis affects saccharolimous levels. That one, again, is a little more medical since I'm not a medical professional, but reach out to me, Mark. I'll connect you with that resource. Oh, Francis, this is a great question. I'm glad you brought this one up too. How are bud tenders incentivized? Is there a sales commission? In their experience, they seem rushed more so than pharmacists. A lot of our dispensary experience is like a takeout restaurant, not like a comfortable learning experience. I would say that there are no regulations that govern how bud tenders are paid or incentivized. So it is going to vary by dispensary. And so I think that this is where it would be important for, since it seems like you have explored at least one dispensary somewhere, it may be an opportunity for you to explore another dispensary, and maybe I can help to connect you with another one. Since the pandemic, business models at dispensaries did change a lot. You know, there was a long time that we couldn't have any people in the building at all. And we were doing curbside service, or, you know, had to have everybody really spread out. And so your experience of saying it's like a takeout restaurant, that may be kind of a holdover. I can't speak for the place that you've been specifically, but that may be a bit of a holdover from the pandemic, because a lot of those models did kind of have to end up skewing that way. But what I do know is that there are a lot of dispensaries that have staff who can provide you time to talk about what you want, time to go over the products you've had. Some dispensaries, you may have to schedule this. So kind of like you may have to schedule something with a clinical director, but they have a very knowledgeable, just like senior manager that you can schedule a consultation, and they'll block out, you know, sometimes even as much as an hour to speak with you. Other dispensaries have the staff to be able to do that on demand. You come in and you let them know, like, I want to spend some time talking about these products. I don't want to be rushed. There are dispensaries that kind of can do that on demand with the dispensary agent or the bud tender that helps you. So Francis, if you reach out to me, you can tell me a little bit more detailed about where you've been going, and I might be able to assist in helping you to find a place that maybe you don't feel as rushed, or maybe there's services that are offered at the place that you've been that you might not be aware of. Next question in here, Carla and Jim asked, I think this is directed to everybody. Does anyone know if the transplant pharmacists at Hopkins can talk about medical cannabis interactions? They said, I know they've talked about other drugs and have warned me not to take some drugs that my PCP has prescribed. Does anybody know the answer to that?
We've generally been told that there really hasn't been the testing done with cannabis and transplant medications. That's kind of the when we've asked the question in the past, that's kind of the answer we've always received. And that's one reason why your transplant team will not recommend the use of cannabis. But many transplant recipients do use cannabis to really great results. So that's why we wanted Tracey to be here to give you all the information you need so that if you want to proceed, you can do so with enough information to do so and make it be healthy for you.
Thank you, Michelle. And I think that you just answered Howard's question, which is on was the next one in the list. So then Carla and Jim asked again, are there any sources you would recommend for educating state governments on medical cannabis? We are currently in a state where cannabis is illegal. Yes. There are a lot of really great advocacy groups that have been working in this space for, very long time, decades. Some as many as like 60 years at this point. My mind immediately goes to trying to remember offhand. I think it's Americans for Safe Access or maybe Marijuana Policy Project tend to have, and I think it might be Americans for Safe Access. And if you reach out to me, I can kind of help you find these resources. They tend to have very, I think I remember some of them having like fact sheets for legislators on their website. So things that their organizations have already written out that like these address some of the common concerns of legislators. These are the kinds of things that you can either share directly or take talking points from it to then go have your conversations or to write your own letters or have your own testimony in your state. So I do believe it's Americans for Safe Access, but Marijuana Policy Project is another great organization. NORML has been working in this space a very long time. They're a really great national organization as well. And there's a ton more advocacy groups out there. But those are the ones that are very policy focused for government, I think. All right, we have a question on here from Apollo. Is cannabis considered a herb? I guess I don't really know what would specifically qualify an herb. Cannabis is definitely a plant, which, is, sorry, that's not exactly the best answer to your question. But it, it's got a specific genus and species and is, housed in the plant family, but I'm not sure that I can be more specific about. Herbs are like rosemary and oregano and things like that, and I don't think that cannabis would be considered in that vein, although herbs like rosemary, oregano, they all contain terpenes, which I said I wasn't going to get into in this talk, but there are medicinal properties in terpenes that are found in those plants that, if those terpenes are in cannabis too, there's like medicinal properties too. So that's a pretty cool thing about terpenes. Let's see here. So Steve said that he's on the Hopkins transplant list and just went through recertification, used gummies for insomnia, and nothing was mentioned about my use of the product. That can happen sometimes. That shouldn't happen. But I think that's why knowing what questions to ask your bud tender is important. You want to make sure that you're comfortable with the use of the products that you are consuming, and all that stuff. Let's see. Eileen and Jerry, they said, are products grown and made in the US or do they come from China? It's a great question. In every state that has a program, products are required to be produced within the state that they are in. So in Maryland, when you go into a licensed dispensary, all of the products that you see were grown, and then if it's a processed product, made into the product that you see within the state lines of Maryland. The same is true for every other state. If you are participating in the regulated market, so just make sure that you're not accidentally going to one of those Delta 8 shops, because those can be produced in China or other places. And we talked about that there's no oversight of those types of products or testing.
Well, Tracey, I think this was excellent. I think you put together so much useful information. We will get this deck from Tracey and put it on our website. And of course, you'll get the recording in a week or so once it's been edited, and any links that Tracey sends me for any of those other resources that she mentioned. And we can't thank you enough. Thank you so much.
Yes, Tracey, I want to
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to thank you personally too, Tracey. You do a lot for our organization. I want to thank you very much. We love seeing you today, and we love seeing everybody else in this audience. It's great to see everyone's moving right along into the wintertime. We want you to remember to check out our events pages on our website for advance notices of our future meetings. We have a couple coming up that are very interesting, including next month. Check out our website at www.triomaryland.org. All of our past meetings are posted to our YouTube channel for your convenience. And we want to thank you so much. And we want to wish everybody a great October and an upcoming winter.
And Tracey, you got a lot of thank yous here in the chat, and you even got a brilliant from Diana. So yay.
Thank you.
We've been doing this a long time, and we haven't seen brilliant.
You're the first brilliant. So that is awesome. So thank you, everyone. We hope you have a great weekend. Thank you, Tracey.